All right, let's get into some more. The one and only Bob. Okay. I'm yours. Well, before I go any further, as you might have noticed, there's not distinct chapters for this book. They have different sections. So, like, there's part one, part two, part three. Right now, we're in part one. And each time there's a new section, it's like instead of a chapter title, they'll have something at the very top, like what we left off yesterday says, in my opinion. And then where we're going to start today, it says, I'm yours. So that's kind of like the new chapter, even though it doesn't have a number or anything for the chapter. Let me tell you about being man's best friend. Being man's best friend can mean a lot of things: companionship, belly rubs, tennis balls, but it can also mean a dark, endless highway and an open truck window. It can mean the smell of the wet wind as hands grab the box you're in with your brothers and sisters and you go sailing into the unkind night. And still, crazy as it sounds, you're thinking, but I'm yours, I'm yours, I'm yours. No one. That's what being man's best friend can get you: a black highway, an empty box, and no one in the world but you. In the early days. I don't remember much about my early puppy days. It was 3 years ago, but sometimes it feels like 300. Mostly, I recall fighting with my sibs for the primo meal spot. Lots of squirming and squeaking, everything soft and milk smelling and movable, like we were one great big complicated animal. I never met my dad, and my mom didn't say much about him except that he was trouble. Mom had a beautiful fawn coat, Chihuahua, some this, some that. Nice, messy bloodline. Mutts rule. Mom crooned to us, told us stories, laid down the law. I wonder if she knew she didn't have much time to prepare us for the world. We were born in a dark place, probably under some porch stairs, I suspect, since I remember the sound of boots plodding up and down, the biting and ugly smell of human feet. They called my mom Rio, and they fed her most days, though sometimes she had to fend for herself. She never showed fear toward them or respect. Indifference, I guess you'd say, unless they tried to handle one of us. She growled, then hoping to make it clear that we were hers and hers alone. I myself got picked up a couple times. The hands reached in, grabbed. They were rough and smelled of strange scents, bitter and meaty. My mom's growl made me fearless, and I wiggled and yipped. The hands moved me back to a warm place where I could sleep and drink and dream in safety. Still, I understood in my simple puppy way that dogs belonged to humans, and that was how it would always be. Boss. My mom wasn't much for names. She'd had a lot of glitters. I guess she'd run out of ideas. My brother, first, was naturally the firstborn. Runt, my youngest bro, was the last. Dot had a little spot on her back, and Yip was always complaining. I was rowdy, goes without saying, and that left my oldest sister, well, we'll call her Boss. Boss was a small but mean, with a distinctive sharp sounding bark. She could outmaneuver any of us to the best spot for dining. I admired her grit, even if she did get on my nerves. When we got a bit older, less blind, more cocky, I fought her off occasionally, but mostly Boss won. She was fearless, that pup. Alone. The truck happened without warning one night. They threw us in a box, left my mom behind. I can still hear her frantic howls. I landed in a muddy ditch. It was a cloudy night, nearly freezing. Even the moon had abandoned me. And the smells, oh, everything so wild and unknown. Animals with big jaws and bigger appetites, birds that swooped in to kill, death and life all mixed up together. I searched for my siblings until the truth became clear. I was utterly alone. The next morning, I began my slow journey, moving through the tall, wet grass, my limbs stiff from the cold. Now and then, I'd drink from the mud puddle or gnaw on some grass, but by evening, I was wobbly with hunger and thirst. I followed the highway, Every time a four-wheeled creature roared by, I froze in fear. And yet, and this is what slays me, I knew that cars meant humans, and humans meant the possibility of living just as much as they meant the possibility of dying. And darkness had fallen when it came out of nowhere, the owl. A shadow in a shadow. They don't make a sound, not a sound. It's quite impressive when you think about it. Just as her talons, those marvelous weapons, raked my fur, I caught my right front foot in a small hole and I stumbled. If she'd gotten hold of my body, I wouldn't be here. But all she managed to do was grab my tail. Only time in my life I've regretted my handsome hindquarters. I was airborne, hanging upside down, dizzy and dazed, and just crazy enough to think, hey, I'm actually flying, before the terror really hit me full force. I caught a whiff of another animal below. Later I found out they were pocket gophers, but back then I just knew I was smelling something completely foreign. The owl must have decided the gophers would make a more satisfying meal, so she let loose her grip and I plummeted back down to the earth. Maybe it was my puppy fat, or my soft bones, or my incredible good fortune, but I didn't die. Didn't even break anything. I'd flown twice in my short life and lived to tell the tale. I found a small hollow at the base of a fallen tree, poked my nose in and got a swat and a hiss from a grouchy raccoon. Kept going, waddling, whimpering, lights ahead, new, strange smells. Kept going, kept going. It's amazing how much the sheer will not to die can keep you moving. Exit 8. I finally came to a small road curving off the main highway. Exit 8 turned out to be a big billboard overhead had a picture of a terrifying animal on it. Of course, I didn't know what a billboard was. I didn't know that the scary animal was a gorilla, let alone that he would become my dearest friend. But something told me to follow the off-ramp. And eventually I ended up on exit 8. Big, top mall and video arcade, home of the one and only Ivan. I made it to the mall, slept in a dirty hay by some garbage bins. The next night, I found that hole in Ivan's cage, stole his banana, slept on his belly, and the rest, as they say, is history. For 2 years, I lived at that seedy old place that was part mall, part circus, and all crummy. But that was nothing compared to Ivan. He spent 27 lousy years there. And our dear friend Stella, an old circus elephant, was stuck there for most of her life, too. When Stella passed away, it nearly broke Ivan's heart. I tried like crazy to get him through those dark days, but what really saved him, I think, was Ruby, our baby elephant friend. Before Stella died, Ivan promised her he'd get Ruby out of that awful place. And to my amazement, he actually pulled it off. Ivan and Ruby and a bunch of other pals ended up going to different places, zoos, sanctuaries that knew how to take care of them. They're with others of their own kind, and they'd love and well taken care for. It's been over a year now since we all moved, and they seem so much happier now. Me, I lucked out. My girl, Julia, whose dad had worked at the mall, decided her family needed a dog. Who was I to argue? 2 square meals, my own bed, all the belly rubs I could beg for? What dog in his right mind would say no to that? The best part is, we don't live far from Ivan and Ruby. I get to see them all the time. I'm glad they're nearby, and I'm thrilled they're settled in so well. Really, it's a solid situation. But it's not a perfect one. Tennis ball. The way I understand things, it's like this. We live on a lonely ball called Earth, and humans have basically been throwing it against the wall for as long as the poor old ball's been falling apart. It's like me with the tennis ball, chewing away until it's nothing but pieces of slimy rubber that taste like, well, slimy rubber. And that means there aren't as many places left for wild animals. Seems there are good zoos and good sanctuaries and bad sanctuaries, just like there are good dog families and bad dog families. The good places are trying to keep wild species healthy and safe. They don't want endangered animals to go away forever. They also don't want the earth to turn into a slimy, dilapidated tennis ball. Although honestly, slimy rubber doesn't taste half bad. You should try it sometime. The thing is, I would give anything to see my dear pal Ivan deep in the jungles of Africa where he was born, or to see Ruby running across the savannah with a herd of elephants, her big old ears flapping in the wind. I'd give up a mile-high pile of bacon cheeseburgers to see that happen. I really would. But it ain't happening. I get that, and so do they. When you're an animal, it helps to be a realist. And that's where we'll stop. Getting the intros into meeting these people, these characters, I like it. Bob, he's a good guy.